Hey everybody, Dr. Scott at Thrive Family Chiropractic. Today we are tackling anxiety. Now, a lot of you watching, moms, dads, adults, we kind of know what anxiety is. A lot of us probably struggle with it. I know that is the case for me. Now, the funny thing is if there's got to be some of you out there that are like me that just, looking at the past years, I just always thought I handled stress well, didn't have anxiety. That never really crossed my mind. But when I started to actually diving into some of the issues I was having with my own health or just my own daily life, I started to realize that I have, in my case, kind of some high functioning anxiety. So if you're unsure, listen to this whole video, pass it along to people. But we also want to address how common and crazy and scary and all the things anxiety is in our kids. And honestly, maybe even your newborn, your baby, but definitely your older kids and into your teenage years, okay? So what do we look for? How do we test it and not just try to guess if they have or not? Because there is a way. We're going to cover that later in the video. And then what do we do about it, right? So if you want more information than what I'm going to cover in this video, read the article that I have linked. Okay, it's going to give you quite a bit more information, background story, all that kind of stuff. And then also come Tuesday night, February 28th at 7 p.m. to the Perfect Storm Workshop, because anxiety is definitely one of the things we're going to cover, right? And anxiety is basically underlying stress. So our nervous system is dysregulated, okay? Neurochemicals, neurotransmitters, you can kind of go into all of the science of that in the brain with anxiety and depression and some of these other mental health disorders. But what if that's not the underlying root cause, okay? Question. Right? We have some answers to that. And there's actually a lot of really cool over the last 10 years research that's showing, what's causing some of those things to go haywire or wrong in our brains comes from somewhere else. Okay. So stay tuned. In a few minutes, we're going to cover that. So first and foremost, what are the signs of anxiety? And I have some of those listed here on the whiteboard. So if you feel like you're always restless or wound up or on edge, right? Like that's a pretty big sign of some anxiety going on. If you always feel fatigued or exhausted, right? So you wake up tired, it doesn't matter how much sleep you get. That was one thing for me. Of course, the restless kind of wound up on edge, the always kind of feeling tired no matter what. That was definitely something I struggled with. Brain fog, man, how common do I hear it on a daily basis about how many people like just have concentration issues, brain fog, difficulty concentrating and staying on task. Those kind of things are a good sign of anxiety. Now, some of these are going to be present in your kiddos already. Maybe they're in school and they have trouble focusing in homework and all those kind of things, okay? Next one is irritableness, kind of goes with that, kind of wound up on edge, but annoyed easily, maybe easy to anger. Some of those can be character traits in us, but a lot of times if we're in a really stressful time in our life, we have some underlying anxiety, those things are going to be amplified, right? So watch out for that. And then the next one is probably like the one that you're all going to be like, oh yeah, that's me. Muscle tension, tightness, just feeling like we're holding ourselves like this all day. We start getting those aches, the headaches, all of sorts of musculoskeletal things. But again, too much to go into today, but those are just symptoms of an underlying issue majority of the time, guys, which is why a nervous system, neurological approach to your health and not just rubbing out a tight spot or cracking, a joint that's all great and fine, but that's not what's really going on under the surface. You're dysregulated. You're in a state of what's called dysautonomia in your nervous system, and it's leading to and causing a lot of that, okay? Do you feel the need to kind of crack your neck or kind of constantly crack your back? Those are signs of some anxiety issues, right? Sleep struggles. Go to this side. Sleep struggles, maybe your restlessness at night, your brain doesn't shut off, you wake up, and again, kind of going back to the whole being tired and fatigued thing. Okay, so that's a huge issue. Worry. So you just tend to worry about all sorts of things, maybe some unwarranted worry, right? So those are signs of anxiety. And then the last one we have here is digestive issues. So constipation is super common, bloating, gas, like just all those kind of things, nausea. So if you constantly kind of feel this underlying nauseous feeling, anxiety might be at the roots of that, okay? So next we're going to go into more specifically, well, what about our kids? Like, how does that look in a kids? You know, in kids, especially little ones, it's going to be less likely to be some of these things that we experience as adults. Like, just think about the last time you had some anxiety or like a high level of stress. You might have had the stomach ache, the nauseous feeling, but a lot of times it's the tension, it's the neck pain, it's the headaches, that kind of stuff. Well, kids can get all of that, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times it's harder to say or harder to tell, especially in little kids. It's more likely to be kind of sensory tension, immune challenges, so they get sick a lot, they can't kick the sick out of their system, or digestive challenges, right? So like, man, they are bloated, they're not pooping regularly. That could be a newborn, a toddler, whatever. They don't go every day, which they need to be pooping every day. It's crucial. You gotta get that crud out of there, man. That's toxic, right? It's toxic to keep that stuff inside of us. So one thing that we look at, especially with kids, and you can look at with your own is tone, what we call tone. So muscular tone. So are they low tone, which means, like, for example, a baby would be like just really floppy, like a toddler that just is uncoordinated and has really just low tone. High tone, the opposite of that, would be a kid that's always wound up. That seems like they're always tight. Their back muscles are tight. A baby even, like if you pick up a baby and they're, stiff as a board, I mentioned that last week, that's a major, major sign of some underlying stressors that really need to be addressed now. Like, do not wait. Don't wait for it to turn into something like anxiety and behavioral issues later when they're older. Check it out now, okay? Let's see here. I wanted to make sure that didn't freeze. I got something on the computer I want to show you in a second. I saw the screen go black. So built up tension, built up stress, and subluxation, so those things that we look for in our office, I mentioned this word earlier, leads to what's called dysautonomia. What that means is dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system, if you haven't heard of that before, there's two divisions. It's called the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Think about it like your fight or flight is your sympathetic, and your parasympathetic is called the rest and digest. Another analogy is think about your car. Gas pedal, sympathetic. Brake pedal, parasympathetic. You have to work both of those in conjunction with each other in order to drive down the road safely, right? You need to give some gas in certain situations. You need to put on the brake in other situations. Your body and your nervous system are in a constant state of receiving input from the environment, but also internally, what's called interoception. So we need to be able to handle all of these sensory things going on inside and outside of us and regulate that and control that, right? So when that's all dysregulated and messed up, you're gonna start seeing things come out, right? And it manifests in kids and adults differently. Again, sometimes it's musculoskeletal, sometimes it's headaches and neck pain and back pain and inflammation and all these things, what people typically go to a chiropractor for. But what you don't think about is those mental challenges, behavior issues, tantrums, meltdowns, sleep issues, energy levels, fatigue, all of the things that I just listed up here, right? Digestion, immune system, all of those struggles really start at the core and at the roots with a dysregulated nervous system, dysautonomia, okay? So what are the causes of, I don't even really need my whiteboard today, I'm just talking through it anyway, but what are the causes of dysautonomia, of a dysregulated nervous system? Well, we simply say the 3 T's. We got toxins, trauma, and thoughts. So basically toxins, the toxic load in our environment is crazy, but we can mitigate a lot of that. The nutrition, the things we put in our body, the things we put on our bodies. So all of the deodorants and makeups and sprays and perfumes and candles in our house, all of these things that are toxic really, really put the gas pedal on, okay? That sympathetic overdrive. Okay, second one is trauma. So that's the physical stuff. That's past injuries, current injuries, posture. Basically, think about that as the musculoskeletal stuff that might be going on in you. And third was thoughts. So that's the emotional stress that we have. So money and kids and jobs and family and all of the stuff, what's going on in the world. Oh my gosh, COVID and this and that and flu and all the things that just seem to stress us out. Man, that puts that gas pedal on. And I know a lot of you can sit here and relate to that. It's like, man, I'm living in sympathetic gas pedal mode. I'm always on the go. I seem like I'm always stressed. I'm wound up. I'm tight. All of these things matter, right? So think about that. Now think about that for your kids too, because they're experiencing so much of that as well. Maybe not so much the financial stress and some of these things we do as parents and adults, but man, our kids are being overloaded with stress these days, and it's leading to more and more problems, okay? So the one thing I want to specifically talk about with kids that we're going to take a real deep dive into on February 28th for the Perfect Storm Talk is birth trauma. If you've heard me talk about this before, you know. Birth trauma is one of the most undiagnosed issues after labor and delivery. Like, I will present the research that shows how common it is. Now, what's the most common birth trauma that happens? Anybody guess? The neck. Right? Because of the way that the head comes out and oftentimes how they have to manually pull, twist, turn to help assist the baby. And that's even with a natural vaginal delivery. C-sections are even worse, believe it or not. We'll go there that night. And then, of course, you throw in any kind of interventions like forceps and vacuums. Man, that just puts so much load and what we call axial traction. The little baby's necks are not meant to be pulled and twisted like that. So there is so much trauma that can happen in the upper cervical spine. And guess what lives in the upper cervical spine? Well, your spinal cord, your brain stem. The brain stem, which is the master control center or communication center between the brain and the body. Everything goes through there. Right? So if you're seeing digestive issues and immune issues, it's like that's the connection, brain-body connection through that upper cervical spine. Now, more so than that, you maybe have heard of this little thing called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is what we're really going to hammer. You need to read about it and look it up. In the last 10 years, the research that's been done into the vagal nerve theory is astounding. We've known for a long time that that nerve that comes from your brain, it's one of your cranial nerves, comes down through the neck and then goes into your chest and your stomach. It innervates and controls partly your heart and lungs, but it is the nerve, the communication to your gut, to your gastrointestinal system, thus your immune system, because most of your immune system lives inside of your abdomen, in your gut, right? So that's why that brain-gut connection is so important. Now, here's the cool part. How does this relate to anxiety? Okay, so there's a lot of researchers out there who are actually calling the vagus nerve the social vagus nerve. Why? Because they've discovered that there's branches of it that go to the center of your brain, the amygdala and other places that are the areas of the brain that regulate and control behavior, emotional responses, irritability, just that social emotional part of your brain. Wow! I mean, when I started reading this stuff years ago, it just blew my mind. Like, how does an adjustment or how does therapy or how do these things in the neck affect someone's anxiety and depression? Like, come on, really? Really? Okay? I'm always kind of a born skeptic, right? But man, you start reading the research and then you start experiencing it in the clinic. Oh my gosh, like people that, we don't claim any of this. Like, we don't treat anxiety, we don't treat depression. People come in with it and they tend to see reductions in that when we actually get to the source of the problem, which is a dysregulated dysregulated nervous system. And then oftentimes that vagus nerve is not operating and functioning at high optimal levels, right? So it's just kind of like logical, and you just put these pieces together. Now, how in the world do we know if there's a problem with the vagus nerve? How do we know if we have a dysregulated nervous system? It's not like you can feel that. You can feel tone, high tension, these kind of things. But what we do in our office is what we call neurological scans. So I'm going to show you on the tablet here an example of an EMG. So the EMG is one of the most important things in a kiddo. So you see this little guy, he's 8 years old. He was getting kicked out of class. He had a ton of issues, ADHD diagnostics, all that stuff. So you see here his first EMG, how much color and the red. So that's a lot of muscle tone and muscle energy. So as we've taken him through care, you see how much calmer that is. I'm going to scroll down.